For about the last half hour, we've just been watching a series of explosions going off live. It's like watching a war movie live. Look at it. Look at it. That's the Gaza Strip on fire. Israel retaliating in no uncertain terms to the raid on Saturday by Hamas. Hundreds, maybe even more than 1,000 of their soldiers still marauding around the streets of Israel, we're told, killing people. They shot down in a hail of bullets 260 kids at a pop concert on Saturday. They kidnapped grandmothers, mothers, children. Rape going on an epic level. People being shot through their head in the streets. This is what's going on in Israel. So if any of you feel like supporting poor old Palestine, remember, this isn't Israel's fault. They didn't start this. It's extraordinary. They didn't know about it, but they didn't start it. And they have every reason to retaliate, to seek revenge for what has happened to their innocent citizens. Absolutely dreadful scenes going on right now as we speak. Let's talk to a former soldier. We thought it'd be very interesting to get his take, but of course now a prominent MP. He's a former foreign minister with responsibility for the Middle East and former chair of the Defence Select Committee. It's Tory MP Tobias Ellwood. Thanks for joining us, Tobias.
Good afternoon to you.
Well, first of all, your take on the events of the weekend. I mean, militarily, do we call what Hamas did an invasion, a military invasion, or was it just an onslaught by a bunch of thugs raping and murdering innocent citizens?
Well, it's a mixture of both, really, because it's military in the sense that it was clearly planned. They trained heavily for this. They've gained firepower and hardware from somewhere, I suspect, Iran. They managed to breach the heavily fortified border defense system that surrounds Gaza. I visited Gaza many times, and it's the barbed wire, the defenses are quite something to see. And somehow they managed to penetrate this and attack Israel on land, sea, and air. And it's understandable, given the scale of this, why Israel is now calling this their 9/11. For many years, Israel relied on its well-funded intelligence services and military, the Israeli Defense Force, to keep Israel safe. And now this has been seen as the most deadly attack on Israel in its history, with hundreds of civilians killed, as you've been reporting, dozens taken hostage as well, causing deep trauma for all Israelis and beyond as well, not sure if their country is now safe. And very, very difficult questions for what Israel should do next. Absolutely, they should be going after the remaining Hamas militants, terrorists, let's call them that. They're listed by the United Kingdom as a terrorist organization. So every media outlet, going back to your former point, should be labeling them as such. But a big question is now whether Israel should try and retake Gaza Strip as it's done in the past, bearing in mind 2.3 million people are based there. And what could risk a very long war, it could easily damage the potential of getting those hostages back and potentially see this conflict spill beyond the Middle East system. But whatever this is going to be, it will be a turning point in Middle East history.
As you speak, Tobias, the huge explosions going off right behind you on our screens, completely live. As I say, it's like watching a war film live. So it looks as if, even in its early stages, Netanyahu's retaliation is going to be fierce and devastating. Where do you anticipate events heading in the next few hours, in the next couple of days? More and more pounding of Gaza Strip?
Yes, certainly there'll be that, but ultimately their priority for the Prime Minister will be to shore up and provide stability in Israel proper. As you say, there are still marauding militants. They need to be mopped up and neutralized, and to make sure that their defense systems are back up and operating. Iron Dome, for example, because those rocket missile systems will continue to wreak havoc over Israel. The bigger question, I think, for the West, as we watch this in horror from afar, is who's funding this? Because otherwise we're simply going to watch another cycle of violence in the Middle East. And I point the finger directly at Iran. Iran's proxy military and political influence for too long has been ignored by the West. We've got Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria. We've got the Houthis in Yemen. And of course, Hamas and the Islamic Jihad are backed by Iran in Gaza and the West Bank. And of course, they've got wider influences, the Iranians, backing Shiite terrorist networks in places like Bahrain, Afghanistan, even Pakistan. And I make it really, really clear that we need to be able to prove that the Islamic Revolutionary Guards in Iran are actually behind this. Once we can do that, that organization be listed too as well. However well-intentioned any Middle East peace talks might be about the future of Israel and Palestine, they will get nowhere when 2 million citizens living in Gaza are represented by Hamas, which does not recognize Israel's right to exist. And that is the fundamental challenge that the West faces, because ultimately it is Iran that is actually funding this war with Israel. Let's wake up to that.
Indeed. Now, already Israel has begun bombing southern Lebanon, Hezbollah stronghold, amid fears that Hezbollah has almost been the northern arm of this assault on Israel. And of course, we know that there are rising tensions between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Many believe that the trigger for this invasion was the fact that Saudi Arabia was edging towards doing a kind of a peace deal with Saudi Arabia, and Iran didn't like that. So my basic question, Tobias, is does this conflict have the potential, the danger of exploding out of Israel and out of the Gaza Strip into becoming a general Middle Eastern conflict?
100%. I do hope that we're going to follow the United States and send in some military hardware into the area, not least to be able to provide support for any Britons that need to be evacuated from the Middle East. We need to be prepared for what might be coming over the hill. But you touch on something which is absolutely significant, and that's the relationship between Hamas, Islamic Jihad as well, this other terrorist operation working from Gaza, and Hezbollah and the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guards. That is the triumvirate, if you like, that are working very, very closely indeed, that clearly planned, prepared, and trained for this massive attack indeed. And until we get our heads around what we're going to do about Iran, this will continue to take place, this sort of violence. We missed an opportunity, if you recall, back in January 2020, when Soleimani, the head of the Quds force of Iran, was taken out actually by Donald Trump by a drone strike at Baghdad airport. He was responsible for that massive proxy influence right across the Middle East. It was his personal engagement. The removal of him was an opportunity for the West, the United States and other countries to move in and stand up to Iran, and we failed to do so.
Talking of failures, Tobias, what went wrong with Israeli intelligence? Normally, Mossad, Israel, reputed to have arguably the finest intelligence operation on the face of the planet. This invasion, this attack happened pretty much on the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War in 1973. You would have thought Israel might have been on alert, and yet they seem to have no idea about this. And Netanyahu is in a world of trouble over it. His citizens are saying, where were you? Why didn't you know? What went wrong, do you think?
Well, it is something to be addressed in the longer term. I think the focus now is for Israel to deal with the here and now, the operational side that we've just been speaking of. But you're absolutely right. This is, as I touched on, the Israeli intelligence services prides itself on its informants networks, its ability to be able to probe in and watch from afar what's going on, its spy connections, plus its military might, its ability to be able to stand up and contain the violence. That essentially has been Israel's strategy for the last decade or so, to be able to contain the violence within the confines of the Gaza Strip. That clearly needs to be reviewed, as does indeed the ability to collect and understand the intelligence. Big questions for the future.
Netanyahu said we're in for a long and difficult conflict here. How long do you think it might be, Tobias?
Well, we can't simply guess. As I say, the West needs to have a greater understanding of what's going on, the difference between Fatah that operates in the West Bank and indeed Gaza as well, this terrorist organization, the knock-on consequences to the Middle East. I'm really dismayed by the fact that the United Nations Security Council met in an emergency session on Sunday night, and the international community, custodians of world peace, couldn't come up with a simple statement to condemn what Hamas has done. That is the state of our global security right now. So good nations need to step forward, understand what is going on. And as I say, our focal point needs to be standing up to Iran.
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing, Tobias, the world just changed, and not in a good way. Thank you so much for your time. Excellent to talk to you. Tobias Ellwood, MP there, former Foreign Minister with responsibility for the Middle East Defence Select Committee Chairman, of course, but here really as a former soldier. Great to get his take.